Okay.
You just let that one slide.
Never mind. I was going to say something. Okay, guys. So as I said, we don't have to get through this whole list. But I would like to get a few of the priority topics out on the table and see where we are. And we're not going to kill ourselves here today. We're got full attendance now. Okay, let's start with Senator Elfreth's bill. Let's wait for April. She's making a copy about something. In the meantime, you all have probably been on your desk is a document that's a bit of a summary that was prepared to try to just give you some, headline information, some key things, what's in the bill. Just, I think is instructive. The other thing, and I gotta wait for April to come in. There was a late flurry of some amendments today, which removes some of the remaining opposition, and we can talk about that. Again, I'll let April walk through it to some extent here, but I think with these amendments that came in today, I think it would probably fair to say that there's really not much opposition left to this bill. With that said, we're specifically talking about Senate Bill 526, Senator Elfreth and April. You want to just do your thing?
It's good. All right, Senate Bill 526, Natural Resources, Forest Preservation and Retention. So overall, this bill modifies state law relating to forest preservation and retention by 1, modifying the state's policy to encourage the retention and sustainable management of forest lands, 2, making various changes under the Forest Conservation Act, and 3, modifying and specified jurisdictions, the criteria for the Forest Conservation and Management Program administered by the Department of Natural Resources, although that part is out of the amended bill. I'm not going to walk through line by line because we did that at the previous voting session where this bill was discussed, but big picture, the things this bill is doing, it's making changes to the state's no net loss policy. So this is the state's policy to encourage the retention and sustainable management of forest lands by and the bill replaces the outcome as it has been, which was to achieve no net loss of forest, with a new goal of increasing both forest land and tree canopy. Now, the amendments that were discussed last week change the forest delineation width to be consistent with the state's Chesapeake Bay restoration and reporting framework, just so that we're using the same standards that the state is using to sort of benchmark its progress under the various sort of Bay regional agreements, and specifies a 4-year timeline for measuring progress towards forest and tree canopy goals. Just to be clear, these goals are separate from the Forest Conservation Act. This is just sort of the state's big picture, broad policy towards forest retention and growth. Changes to the Forest Conservation Act. So as introduced, the bill established an alternative method of calculating afforestation and reforestation requirements, eliminated an existing exemption from the Act's requirements for the clearing of land for specified electric generating stations, and established alternative means of meeting afforestation and reforestation requirements, particularly in urban or densely populated areas. Bill also provided more specific guidelines on what constitutes priority forest and vegetation, and requires developers to seek a variance before clearing priority forest. That last piece, that requirement to seek a variance, that is out under the amendments that were discussed last week and as they appear here. Mitigation banking, so this is underneath within the Forest Conservation Act. Just as a reminder, there was an Attorney General's opinion in 2020 that said that the way the state or the way many local jurisdictions were establishing and using forest mitigation banks was not consistent with the Forest Conservation Act as it had existed at that time. So the General Assembly came in and basically put a freeze on the creation of any new mitigation banks using preserved forest rather than planted forest, because that was what the Attorney General's opinion was dealing with. but sort of grandfathered in those existing banks, saying that they could continue to sell credits. The bill, as amended, allows for, clarifies the criteria for qualified conservation or preservation banking. The amendments establish a flat cap on the amount of qualified conservation that may be used for a project, generally to meet up to 50% of afforestation or reforestation requirements. But local jurisdictions may request and the department may approve the use of preservation banking to establish up to 60% of afforestation or reforestation requirements. The amendments also grandfather in the existing approved mitigation banks, including a small number that were under review, but that had not received final approval in 2020, and authorizes new preservation banks only in priority retention areas. The forest mitigation banking program, this is, I referred to this earlier. The bill initially would have altered this to allow for smaller forests in certain counties to be under that program and to receive certain tax credits, or certain tax incentives. The amendments strike those changes, but add uncodified language directing the department to convene a work group to study and make recommendations on how best to incentivize private landowners to conserve forest land, including through enrollment in a forest mitigation plan. So that's big picture what this bill is doing. Specific changes from, there are a couple of small changes from the version of this bill that was discussed last week. There has been just additional discussion between the sponsor and particularly the builders, and they have gotten to a place where the builders are now comfortable with the bill. So if you want to look in the reprint, so in the voting packet, I've noted the new language. So there's new language on page 12 and 12A. the numbering got a little wonky here. Add some intent language that this is under an existing part of the Forest Conservation Act that requires units of local government to develop local forest conservation programs that are consistent with the State Forest Conservation Act. Added some intent language here specifying that those programs should be created affording due consideration to the policy goals established under Title 5, Subtitle 7A of the State Finance and Procurement article. So provisions of law dealing with priority funding areas. So these are the areas of the state that have sort of been slated for development, as well as the plans adopted under Title 1, Subtitle 4, and Title 3 of the land use article. So these are the local zoning or land use plans. There's also new language on bottom of page 12A. This has to do with judicial review of forest conservation plans, puts a timeline or deadline on filing if somebody wants to challenge an approved forest conservation plan. That challenge would have to be brought no later than 30 days after that approval. And then the judicial review must be conducted in accordance with the Maryland rules and must be limited to the record compiled by the department or the local authority that approved that plan. Next changes are on page 13A of the voting packet. This is a fairly significant change. So the way the bill works, there's sort of a statewide baseline requirement for forest mitigation and afforestation requirements. And then locals can create their own program provided that those local programs achieve no net loss of forest. The original sort of calculation under the bill said that essentially there was a 1-to-1 ratio for acres cleared to acres planted, but then there would be a 2-to-1 ratio for certain priority forest. This gets rid of that 2-to-1 and actually puts in a slightly lower ratio of half an acre planted for every 1 acre removed in certified priority funding areas, so long as we are not dealing with priority forest land. So if you're in a priority funding area, it's a lower mitigation ratio requirement unless it's priority forest. There's also an additional requirement here that says, in addition to those sort of general calculations and ratios, that riparian buffers would have to be reforested or afforested. Next changes are on pages 16 and 16A. So page 16, there was just a slight modification to, this is the new language having to deal with how we identify forests that is a priority for retention under the Act. They basically took out one of the provisions that people were finding confusing. And then in 16A, again, just reinforcing this same sort of standard as the judicial review of approved plans. This would be judicial review of any decision to allow clearing of priority forest. That review would have to be conducted in accordance with the Maryland rules and limited to the record, but also specifying very clearly that the department or local authority would have to issue written findings and a justification for the clearing when they made that determination to allow that priority forest to be cleared. And then the final additional changes are on the last page, page 18. Just a couple of more exceptions being added. Already the amendments that were discussed last week had an exception for a solar voltaic facility that was granted a certificate of public convenience and necessity, before July 1st, 2023. This would also say that the Act does not apply to forest conservation plans approved before July 1st, 2024, and that is associated with a subdivision plan, site plan, building permit, or grading or sediment control application, or any revision to such plans or permits. That's it.
Okay, discussion. As I said at the outset, I think at this point, with all these amendments, correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody in the audience wants to correct me if I'm wrong. I think for the most part, most of the pushback opposition are either in a neutral position, i.e. MACO, MML, they're doing that, or the builders, et cetera. NAOP, they raising your hand right there. Those were some of the major. So that's kind of where we are. A lot of work obviously went into this by the sponsor and a lot of collaboration. So that said, any discussion about the amendments? Senator Gallion. Okay, we have a motion, second. Yes, absolutely. Senator Carozza.
So last week when we went through them, I know that the Maryland Forest Association had a couple of small, I think they might have been addressed, but then all these other amendments came back. So I'm just from the standpoint of, do we know which new amendments address the suggestion that the Maryland Forest Association had that I did share with the bill sponsor and one of the bill co-sponsors, and and then it sounds like all the new amendments address the other issues that other stakeholders had. It just looks like a lot of new information. I'm trying to run it down, especially if that one issue with the Maryland Forest Association had been addressed.
So my understanding is that the sponsor spoke with the Maryland Forest Association and they sort of walked back. They do not want to press those amendments. They were concerned about that somehow logging that is not associated with development would be pulled under this act somehow, but it never has been, and nothing in this act, nothing in the bill would change that. So again, my understanding is that the Forest Association the foresters are okay with the bill.
Okay, we had a motion in a second. Senator Hester.
I just had a question. I was trying to understand on page 13A in the new section, point number 2 about the riparian buffers. Can you just recap what that does and where are these riparian buffers on which land?
So that would, I don't know if maybe somebody from the bill sponsor might be able to handle that better. I mean, I will say. What? Oh, there you go.
So if you think about it, Senator, like there are, my understanding would be that if you have this requirement and there was this riparian, which is like a stream or something like that, that's on there, that's when this would kick in and would apply. And that's where it changes sort of like what you need to do and also provides some, ways that you would not if it was in the park area or if it wasn't suitable, but that we want to make sure that by the riparian zones, we are making sure that we do have reforesting or that we're creating forest there, unless these other things are there that make that not possible.
I'm just trying to think if somebody could give me an example. I mean, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Unless you wanted to actually be able to like walk down to the water. Like if it's from the edge, if you're depending on what you're building, right? And so would there be any reason for people to want to access the water and then we're mandating that they reforest it? Like if there's a lake at the bottom of the property that you're clearing and you wanted to go for a swim in the lake, are we requiring that we have to reforest the edge of the lake? I'm just trying to understand the practical implications of this.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that other than that riparian zones, and my wife is a hydrologist, that riparian zones are exactly. And so the reforestation near riparian zones would be critical to getting them back to a condition that they would have been previously and provide for the health of not just the forest at that point, but also the health of the riparian of the waterway as well.
Yeah, we might look for an assist from Mr. Ballantyne. Do you have, you might be able to help out here. Don't touch it.
Tom Ballantyne with NIOP, Maryland, MBIA and NIOP suggested this amendment. To your last question on access, if you look at in my old reprint, it's 2I. There is an ability for the local government to adjust this planting requirement if it conflicts with the allowable uses for the buffer. So that's the access issue. And what this basically does is says, if after you've done all of your reforestation, there's still riparian buffer, stream buffer that does not have forest, that you plant the rest of it. And it's Montgomery County language that's carried over here.
Okay, any additional discussion on the amendments? Again, we have a motion, a second on the table. Favorable. Okay, all in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendments carry. We've got the bill, Senate Bill 526 as amended. We got a motion from Senator Augustine. Senator Gallions, a second. Okay, all in favor of the bill as amended, Senate Bill 526, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go shift over to the House, this list number 24. I'd like to go to the governor's bill, the Clean Transportation Energy Act, and April's going to go out and get a copy of some amendments on this bill. Again, this is the governor's bill. And it does tie into legislation from Senator Augustine from earlier in the session. So it's an important piece of legislation. We'd like to get it to the floor. Just hold on while April comes back with the amendments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So as those are coming around, this is House Bill 550, Maryland Energy Administration, Energy Programs, Modifications, Clean Transportation and Energy Act. We did hear the cross-file of this bill, Senate Bill 548, a while back, closer to the beginning of session, but we have not moved that yet, so we are considering the House bill. This is an administration bill that modifies 2 transportation sector programs funded by the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, modifies the authorized use of certain alternative compliance payments deposited into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and increases the dollar amount cap on the amount of certain CEF revenues that may be allocated towards administrative expenses of the Maryland Energy Administration. So just to bring us up to speed for what the House did with this bill that made it a little different from how it came in. So the bill alters an electric vehicle recharging equipment rebate program. For that program, the House amendments increase the annual cap for the entire program to 2.5 million, increase the caps for rebates that individuals or business entities may receive, and authorizes the Maryland Energy Administration to offer additional benefits for recharging equipment in certain multifamily housing, planned urban developments, and condominiums. So another piece of this bill was the medium duty and heavy duty zero emission vehicle grant program. The original bill would have directed alternative compliance payment fees from the solar alternative compliance payment fees towards that program. House got rid of that, and instead increases the annual appropriation for that program from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund to $10 million. Also alters the maximum amount of a grant to be 75% of incremental costs. The original bill said 100%. Clarifies vehicle equipment qualifications for grant eligibility and establishes certain preferences for grant eligibility. And then finally, for the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, it expands the pool of persons available to benefit from loans and grants, specifically from those alternative compliance, the solar alternative compliance payments, to include overburdened and underserved communities. The amendments that just came around are being offered by the chair, Senator Feldman. These add a study requirement, looking broadly at non-tax financial incentives for solar development in different places, with a interim report specifically looking at the issue of rooftop solar due December 31st, 2023, and a final report due October 31st, 2023.
On that, if you recall,
Or 2024.
we had a piece of legislation dealing with the rooftop solar folks who, that industry is struggling, if you remember, and the source for increasing the grants was going to come out of this ACP fund. When a decision was made that, we don't want to mess with the governor's bill, but the bottom line is, as far as funding and the ACP, that's a broader conversation, I think, during the interim about what we're going to do in that space. But on the other hand, I thought the testimony was pretty compelling that maybe we should at least take a look at some ways we can help our rooftop solar industry, because since 2016, there was a line kind of like all the way down. It was sort of scary. So in any event, the idea of incorporated into this bill, obviously I see safe here from the governor's office. We collaborated, and the governor, I think, also wanted to have some analysis from MEA on what we might want to do next session for that segment of the solar industry. So that's really was the genesis of this study language. So we'll have an interim report back before next session, a broader report on some other topics. Once we're going to have MEA do a study, they're going to take a look at some other things. So that's, again, by way of explanation. Started with that bill, but it kind of made its way into this study, and that's kind of long and short of it. That said, any questions about the amendments or the underlying bill? Obviously, we had a hearing early on. It's a pretty significant piece of legislation by the administration. So, yes,
I do.
Vice Chair Kagan, or yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During the hearing, I had asked the secretary what the difference was between low-income communities and environmental justice communities. And in two places on page 8, all of those words have been removed. And I just wonder if you or SAFE or someone in the room can just clarify that what's left in the bill will still address, because it looks like environmental justice was removed in 3 places. I'm in the third reader version
Just look
of the bill, of the House Bill 550.
Yeah, I should have been clear. We're talking about House Bill 550.
Yes,
Correct. Yeah,
we haven't.
But we have the
moved
House
those.
Bill before us.
we're just working off the House bill because we haven't moved the Senate bill and we don't have to deal with the rules, and simpler to just work off the House bill.
So April, so I don't know if there's a reason why the language was removed, since environmental justice is one of the,
Yeah, so
Priorities.
the substitute for that was the references to overburdened and underserved communities. As defined in section 1-701 of the environment article, this is language that has come up a couple times on bills before. Underserved communities is defined in terms of income. I think it's somewhere in here. And overburdened communities are communities within the 75th percentile for exposure to certain pollutants. So those are, I think Department of the Environment is definitely trying to standardize sort of the use of those terms, because they have a tool that can sort of, a mapping tool that can sort of help to identify those communities.
Kristen, you look like you were raising your hand. Okay. Okay. We're good. Okay. Okay. Any additional questions, comments, motions? Okay. Senator Augustine's moved the amendments on House Bill 550. Is there a second?
Sure.
Senator Lewis Young. Okay. Any discussion on the amendments before we take a vote? Does it to be one roll call vote? You want to do hand raise? Okay. All, it's a, you know what? Yeah. Okay. All in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. Okay. All opposed? Amendments carry unanimously. Is there any further motion on the table on the bill as amended? House Bill. Okay, as amended. Second from Senator Kagan. Discussion on HB 550 as amended. Okay. It's governor's bill. Let's do a roll call. Moria.
Senator Kagan,
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine, Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion, Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson, Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks,
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
No.
Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester.
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simon
Yes.
Senator Simon yes. Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries
Senator
9-2. Let's go back to the Senate list and let's work a few little down here, and then we can go back and do a little of the House bills and then maybe break after we do a little House action. But let's go to 392, Senator McCray bill.
Sorry, I've lost a sheet of paper. I can pull it up here though.
Okay, we have the next bill.
Here, I got it.
Okay, Senate Bill 392.
Okay, Senate Bill 392. This bill establishes the wastewater facility supplemental operations and maintenance grant program administered by the Maryland Water Infrastructure Financing Administration within the Maryland Department of the Environment to support the state's water quality goals by providing competitive grants for publicly owned wastewater facilities facing staffing shortages, maintenance backlogs, and other operations and maintenance challenges that threaten the proper functioning of a facility's enhanced nutrient removal technology. Bill establishes provisions governing grant proposals, prioritization for awarding grant funding, and grant agreements. Amount of the grant award is based on demonstrated need as determined by the department, but may not be more than $3 million. There are amendments in your bill packet. So the first amendment on page 2 of the bill packet from Senator McCray replaces the mandatory appropriation. Originally in the bill, was a mandatory annual appropriation of $10 million for the grant program. This replaces that with a discretionary appropriation, just changes that shall to a may. There is another amendment that starts on page 3. Reprint starts on page 5. This strikes references to the proper functioning of enhanced nutrient removal technology and instead talks about operations and maintenance challenges that threaten, quote, the ability of the facility to discharge clean water and meet applicable federal, state, and local laws. Strike references to a competitive grant process, specifies that the department should prioritize facilities that had high vacancy rates from October 1st, 2020 through October 1st, 2023, as well as facilities that serve a high proportion of users in overburdened and underserved communities, and prohibits the facilities from being awarded more than $6 million in grants during a 3-year period.
Okay, Senator Carozza?
I'm trying to recall the hearing at the issue of who can benefit from the grants and the size of the facilities. Was that? Am I thinking the right bill? And I'm trying to get a sense that does this go beyond the urban areas for other parts of the state?
So it's available to any wastewater treatment facility. However, in evaluating those grant proposals, the priority is given first to those that with that staff vacancy. So this is on page 8 of the voting packet in the reprint. So those with that high staff vacancy rate during that specified period, during the amendment, under the amendments, but also prioritizes the facilities with a design flow of 1 million gallons per day or more. So those are the larger facilities, as well as facilities with a high proportion of users who live in overburdened or underserved communities. So that's not a smaller wastewater treatment facility could still receive this grant. They just might be a little further down behind some of the larger facilities.
Okay, Senator Washington?
That was sort of my question. So this is an existing program? No?
No,
Okay,
this
so
is
it's
a new
completely brand new program. And it's just a priority. So there's a ranking of these facilities. Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions? Vice Chair Kagan?
April, I just did there seem to be 76 of these public wastewater treatment centers, and I just counted all 24 jurisdictions. Each of the 24 jurisdictions have at least one. What I wonder is, and I don't know how to read all of this data, because there's a lot of gobbledygook in this, but I wonder, there must be size differences, usage needs, all that. Can you speak to, because not all 76 are created equal or have similar needs. I wonder if you could share with us what the ranges are when we're talking about up to $6 million in 3 years. I assume that's not going to be in a teeny tiny place.
No, I mean, yes, there is a broad range. It's been a while since I've looked at this bill, but if you give me a second, I can probably pull up some information that's related to that.
Senator Simoner.
So I appreciate the intent of this, but I've seen some legislation like this before, and it almost seems like it's targeting without saying who they want to get these grants. By saying what the staffing was primarily in the past. I mean, it goes back 3 years and says, you know, they fit that category. And then they put the size in, fits that category, and then there are other things. And what I don't see is saying what facility needs it the most, which one helps the environment the most. And I just don't think that's good policy. If we want to specifically say we want to get to that facility, we should do that. Because I think there maybe that is the top of the list, but there's others that may need it more. It could help our environment more. And I just don't like when we start singling out specific places like that, unless we're going to actually call it out and put it in a bond bill or whatever.
Okay, any further discussion? And I guess I'll say, because I think we still have some time here. If on any of the bills we take up today, if there's a lot of conversation, people have some questions, we can roll it in, you know, to tomorrow or Thursday. We've got some time this week. I don't want to get too dragged down if there's a lot of questions or some issues people want to kind of get comfortable with. Senator Hester?
Thank you. I had a back and forth with, I think it was Senator Elfreth from Budget and Tax, and also with Committee Council, but where the money was coming from. This is coming from the Bay Restoration Fund? No.
No, and that's what I was trying to look, because there is an existing grant program or so the Bay Restoration Fund primarily funds capital. So the actual upgrades. There is currently under the Bay Restoration Fund a small pot of money that can be used for operations and maintenance grants. But it actually, that money is, you're only eligible for it if you are already meeting sort of your enhanced nutrient removal, the requirements basically. And actually, if you're overperforming, if you are removing nutrients above sort of the state requirements, you get more operations and maintenance funding. My understanding of the goal of this bill was to provide funding for operations and maintenance, not from the Bay Restoration Fund, just generally funded for those plants that, because their operations and maintenance was lacking so hard, they were struggling to even meet sort of the baseline requirements.
So this is a straight just mandate from.
Right, but as amended, it's not even a mandate. It just creates the program and it encourages the governor.
So there's a new amendment, because on page 9 of the reprint, it still says shall.
Right, so there's another amendment that's not incorporated in those amendments. That's the made of the shall and the may.
Okay, so Senator Washington.
Thank you. So so there's this, I also look at, there's the Water Supply Assistance Grant Program, and then there's the Bay Restoration Fund Wastewater Grant Program. So I guess those are the two. And the Bay Restoration Fund Grant Program does suggest that it provides upgrades. So is it that this bill needed because this program currently funded? I guess 1 and 2, is the program, or maybe the program's not funded anymore. I mean, I just don't know. It looks like under the Bay Restoration Wastewater Program, it looks like the criteria that are sought for would work, because it talks about rehabilitating and the upgrading, but it doesn't address staffing.
And that's the difference. Yeah.
So
the Bay Restoration Fund.
So is that fund active and available? And
I mean, I don't know exactly what you're looking at, but if that's
I'm just looking at the Maryland Department of Environment website, and it has water infrastructure financing, and then it has this Bay Restoration Fund. So maybe we do have some questions, but if there's an existing program and we just want to add qualifications, that might be.
Yeah, so, and I would encourage, if we do hold off on this bill, take a look at the fiscal note, because the fiscal note talks about the current wastewater account operations and maintenance
Yes,
grant program,
right,
because
yeah.
that's what this bill is specific to. Again, primarily what the Bay Restoration Fund funds is capital upgrades. It's new technology, it's infrastructure upgrades. This bill is intended to get at maintenance and operations. There is a small portion of the Bay Restoration Fund that can be used for that. And I think it's, the maximum allocation per facility is $300,000 per year. You can go a little bit over that again if you're overperforming.
Okay, we're gonna go to Center Augustine. What I'm gonna suggest is after, you get a question out, let's hold this bill tomorrow. Let's try to maybe knock out a few other bills, but I think there's enough questions. Center Augustine.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I just looked at from a scale standpoint. I just was like looking around. It looks like the with regard to the design flow elements, it looks like Back River, it can do 180 million gallons per day. So it sounds like 1 million gallons might be a relatively small thing, or relatively small, but I think it's worthwhile for us to understand sort of like what those are and how this may work for different folks as well. It's a part of the conversation.
Okay, let's hold the April. Respond. Hold this bill for the next voting session. Let's go back to the Senate list. Just quickly, I know some folks don't love the designation world, these various designations. There did seem to be interest in. If you look at, there's a crossfile both on the House side. If you look at Senate Bill 497 and the crossfile from Senator Resnick, which is House Bill 178, making Maryland Rye this designated state spirit. There seemed to be interest in the committee. There's definitely interest in the House. I think partly because of the sponsor on the House side. This is seemingly an important bill for the House, but nonetheless, there was interest in the committee. So yes, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have proudly, strongly, enthusiastically, definitively voted against the state exercise, the state fossil, the state cat, the state, all that stuff, because I think they're dumb. And the whole idea of bringing, third graders down to see how a bill becomes law and they have to come up with something, I just thought was not the best use of our time. This one struck me as different because they really made the case on history and on economic development and tourism. And so for that reason, I actually would like to move favorable on this bill.
Now on this one, we've got Senate Bill 497 and HB 178. So if you vote, it's going to count as a vote on both bills. Okay, does anybody want to be a co-sponsor of this bill? Okay, I'm gonna.
Buying us a bottle.
Okay, I'll go on there too. Okay, we've got Feldman, Hester, Brooks, Watson, Kagan. Okay,
Wait, we got
Right.
it. We may have to do that one more time, Senator.
okay, everybody raise your hand again. Hester, Brooks, Feldman, Watson, Kagan.
Okay, got it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, and again, this is going to count for a vote on both cross-file bills. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, those two bills carry unanimously. Okay, another bill I want to just get on the table for some discussion. This bill I brought in a month ago, Senate Bill 477. Let me just say, because we had a bill today earlier, and I just by way of a little background, and I'll let April describe some of the amendments. But so since the hearing we had on the electric vehicle infrastructure topic, which we've now as a state made a decision, we're moving to the California model. So, it's going to start in 2027, 2028. We're going to go big. So this issue of infrastructure for electric vehicle charging is a big topic. And I actually didn't know at the hearing that Howard County has actually had something in place, new construction for single family homes requiring since 2019, new construction, you got to put EV ready equipment in place. I also remember Senator Simon Ayre saying that if we're going to do this, we want to make sure it works, that we're not just doing puff. So just by way of some visual, if you go to the House packet, I thought this was I thought was good. If you go to the House bill, which is House Bill 830, and you go to, do we have that handout? Where is that hand? It's okay, go to page 24. So if you look at page 24, this difference between EV capable, EV SE ready, and EV SE installed. And so the House has sent us back a bill, it's House Bill 830, that really did a lot to the multifamily housing component of the bill that made everything pretty much EV capable. And I guess to the point that Senator Simon Ayre, EV capable for the multifamily housing seems almost useless. Like, I don't know that multifamily housing folks with just a pipe or a tube without the ability to actually charge their cars will ever either buy an electric vehicle, or that language which came back from the House would be that helpful. On the other hand, just going back and forth with NAOP and the rest, I could see that we're not going to be able to get to resolution on the multifamily dwelling component of the bill. So under some of the amendments that April's about to describe, we're tasking MEA to come basically do a study, whether it's the ratios. I think Senator Simon Ayre, remember you talked about was 25-1, 10-1, different models. Come back with some recommendation. What's a good ratio? What are some, and if you look at the language, you'll see, come back with some ideas on how we can nail this multifamily dwelling unit part of the electric vehicle. So that then turns us to new construction and substantial renovation for single family homes, townhouses, and the like, with garages, carports, and driveways. And that's where I think we still have an opportunity to kind of get together with NAOP, but I do feel it's important to keep the conversation going. And so with that background, and I just want to get a conversation going about potentially sending something back to the House and keep things going, because I think if we can move the ball forward just in those categories, I think it would be important in terms of, again, electric vehicle infrastructure in our state, which is lagging at the time that we're adopting California models. So we had a Delegate Fraser Doggo's bill earlier today. I think just this is, again, a hot topic. So with that whole background and speech, April, what do the amendments do that I'm asking the committee at least take a look at and have a conversation about?
Sure. And so again, as the bill came over from the House, it would require the construction or significant renovation of housing units that include a garage, carport, or driveway for each residential unit. So this is the non-multifamily, to include one dedicated parking space with EV supply equipment that is fully installed. So that's the EV SE installed parking space, one EV ready parking space, or one EV capable parking space. The bill also includes related requirements for the construction of new housing units or multifamily residential buildings that do not have dedicated garages, carports, or driveways. Bill applies only prospectively and does not affect any new construction or significant renovation. The amendments being proposed by Senator Feldman, these are start on page 14 of the voting packet, makes some technical changes, but also strikes all the references to EV capable parking spaces, and instead requires that, again, for this non-multifamily, so just dealing with the housing units with dedicated garages or parking or driveways, that they would either have to have an EVSE installed parking space, so that's where all the equipment is there, or an EV ready parking space. And so again, this is where that diagram is sort of helpful. EV ready is essentially, it's the same sort of outlet that you would put in for if you had an electric dryer or an electric oven or stove. That's essentially what an EV ready parking space is. It's a parking space with one of those sort of outlets at it. Also strikes requirements for multifamily residential buildings and instead requires the Maryland Energy Administration to study issues and costs related to requiring multifamily residential buildings to include EVSE installed in EV ready parking spaces. The last significant change in the amendments is changing the definition of significant renovation. As it came over from the House, defined significant renovation to mean bill really quickly. So on page 20 of the voting packet, to mean level 3 alterations as defined in the International Existing Building Code. Level 3 renovations is anything where basically 50% or more of the structure is being renovated. This instead defines significant renovation to mean any renovation to a housing unit that includes electric panel upgrades that increase the capacity of the panel. It is our understanding from talking to the people who sort of work in this field that that is the real expense sort of item. So if you're already upgrading the panel to increase its capacity for some other purpose, the additional cost of doing the EV ready or the EV installed parking space should be relatively minimal.
So let's get some questions out on the table. Again, that's really my goal here. Sarah Augustine.
Yeah, mine is this, it's actually a different question. So the way that this is written, you have to provide this for what about a housing unit that doesn't have a parking space at all? Because we're in a TOD sort of situation where we don't want to,
So page 20, this subsection applies to the construction or significant renovation of housing units that include a separate garage, carport, or driveway for each residential unit.
Okay, great.
So that's it.
So that covers that. Perfect. Thank you.
Senator Kagan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just clarifying, April, you said that this is prospective only, and I get what that means. And then you said, and therefore it doesn't apply to renovation or new construction. And I assume that that was backwards, right? That it does apply. It's prospective, so it does apply new construction or significant renovation.
Just complete that sentence that
Okay.
for which a complete commercial or residential service request is made to the local utility for a development application or building permit that is filed before the bill's effective date. So it doesn't apply if you already have all the utility.
You've
sort of
made
stuff.
it 90% down to the goal line. We're not going to stop and send you back to the line of scrimmage. Can I just say, I just used the sports analogy. Okay, thank you, April. I assumed that was what you
No,
meant.
you're
but-
right. I think I was
Okay, thank you.
skimming and I glossed over the details there.
Okay, guys, just, get out the questions and see where. Senator Carosa.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, you're very good at bottom lining the information. So I know we're working off a House Bill 830 that's come over here. So these amendments are under consideration now. Is that is coming over this way? And could you just, with these amendments, could you and now with
Well,
the
just to be
study?
clear, this is the House bill added. We had a cross-file bill. So what you have in front of you, they're not amendment, you mean House amendments, right?
Right.
So they have sent over a bill. What I'm proffering is another set of amendments that would be in substituted for those House amendments, if that makes itself clear.
So what came up? So we're working off that House bill.
Let's just focus on 830. House Bill 830 is in front
Okay.
of us. We do have the cross-file bill that doesn't have all those House amendments as well, but obviously we're talking about ultimately one product here,
Okay.
so.
So could you just you do this so well, just do the bottom line as far as now this House bill with these amendments, and how that relates to both the required spaces and
Yeah, well, the
charging stations.
right, okay, so just to be candid, I mean, we have NAOP and I see Bill Kress and Tom Valentine and Nick Mans. Okay, the House amendments are essentially the NAOP amendments, I think pretty much verbatim. And I think this is a dialogue we want to keep having. My thing about the multi-dwelling units is these amendments go EV capable, which if you look at the graph, I think makes that conversation kind of a non-starter, because I just think if you're multifamily dwelling unit, having some tube that doesn't actually have an outlet is not. And I back and forth with the House, rather than going back and forth on that topic, my amendments basically put that into a study with some recommendations. And so when you talk about ratios and all that, that was really dealing with multi-dwelling units, one space per 10, or have to be EV, whatever. So we're sort of punting the ball a little bit on multi-dwelling units. We're focusing specifically under my amendments, focusing specifically on new construction and significant renovations for single family dwelling homes and townhouses and the like, that and duplexes, that have garages and driveways and carports. And so that's kind of in a nutshell.
Thank you. So this, in essence, we're focusing on the infrastructure with the charging stations and parking spaces for residential housing only.
Right.
Is that as opposed to before we were looking at multi? And,
Exactly.
And it
Under,
doesn't,
well, I should say under the amendments I'm proffering, the House bill does include multi dwelling units, but only EV capable is necessary, or that is adequate. And I'm suggesting that I don't see that as being adequate for that type of housing arrangement. And so thus punting that, because I think we go back and forth. I don't think we're going to ever get agreement on that component. So let's see what we can achieve and move forward on EV infrastructure when it comes to the other parts of the bill. But that's, so I hope I'm trying to be clear on this, but there's a difference between the House bill amendments that came over and what I'm putting forward for some discussion here. So any further discussions? Do people need to get better understanding? We could again move this to tomorrow as well. Senator Hester?
Just trying to understand what kind of project require the panel upgrade? Like how many big construction projects require a panel upgrade? Is it like most of them?
Okay,
Is it
guys,
half of them?
I'm reluctant to do this because I don't want to have another mini bill hearing, but here, I see Mr. Ballantyne, Mr. Kress. Here, can you guys come up here? Because I think we're going to probably hold it, but I really kind of want to get this on the table so everybody kind of understands a question like that. I'm not going to be able to answer that, and I don't want to put April in that position either. So
this bill with the amendments, if you're looking at a panel upgrade, if you're going to add on, you're going to do new heating and air, HVAC, that might be a heat pump. You're going to do a panel upgrade. You need to add, you're doing addition, you need a larger panel, 100 amp to a 200 amp panel. And so those renovation costs are in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. And so when you're doing that, having the panel open, having all that done, it's minimal extra labor to install this outlet. So that was the thought there.
right, so we've under my amendments, we're redefining what is a significant renovation from where it was.
And as we go towards net zero and electrification, you're going to see folks that are going to be upgrading their panels. It's going to happen.
Okay, Tom, in all fairness, I'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Just, well, thank you for the opportunity. Just to be clear, our interest.
Your name, because the people.
Tom Ballantyne with NIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association. Our interest in this bill was more on the multifamily side. The Maryland Building Industry Association has been involved in the single family townhouse portions of this for several years. And I think one of the things that I would point out is that the bill that came over from the House had the same number of live chargers and more infrastructure than the bill as introduced. There were some changes made here to definitions that we think you should keep, regardless of what you do with the kind of the percentages of infrastructure or whether you move a bill that deals with new multifamily construction or not. There are, I think, as everyone, all the witnesses at the hearing agreed that there are some significant cost and practical challenges to renovating existing multifamily buildings.
Okay, since we got some experts here, let's just throw out the questions. Senator Gallion.
I think we talked about this a little bit at the bill hearing, but just for a reminder. So you mentioned the numbers for retrofitting and doing like $3,000 to $4,000 ballpark for a brand new single family dwelling. What's the cost to get this ready, that it's ready to plug in? Not
So,
just the-
yes, so these are estimates. It depends upon where the panel is in the house. Right, you got to get it near the garage, near the parking space. Usually the panels are on exterior walls at the front of the homes because it makes it easier. The material cost is between $150 and $200. The labor for the installation could be $300-400. It's just hard to know exactly, but it's essentially the same cost for putting in an electric dryer outlet or an electric range outlet. And typically it's going to be a shorter run because it's going to be in the garage or near the front of the home instead of running throughout the house. So it's actually less expensive with respect to labor. So
Okay, Bob, you want to say anything? And again, let's keep it tight because I don't want this to devolve into a bill hearing, but I really, it's not.
On behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association, Ms. Graff had to leave and couldn't stay, but we saw the amendments about an hour ago and would really like to be able to run them by our members and get some numbers. I think some of the changes in talking to Mr. Ballantyne, who probably knows more about this from a substantive point of view than I do, but some of the changes for the single family homes that are in the bill, we were okay with what was in the bill as introduced for single family. But I think with some of the changes about the voltage and going from 30 to 40, significantly, in our opinion, may change the cost. And we'd at least like to have one day to get some feedback.
Okay, as I said, any other questions? And I'll get back to this point about the bill as originally introduced. I don't recall that being the case, but if we're just let's focus just now on, let's move away from multi-dwelling. That could be 2024, but it would be great, I think, for the General Assembly to do something here on the new and significant renovation side of things. I still am hopeful maybe we could get together in a kumbaya. You did that on the forestry bill just a little while ago, and
Right.
you know, and I'm hoping
Yeah.
maybe we could still do that here. But while we have these guys at the table, any just further questions, Senator Brooks, and then we're going to
Thanks,
hold it.
Chair.
And we'll
Bill,
make,
this is you. So I know in a house, you've got 120 volts coming in. And then if you wanted to do like a dryer, then that's 240. So you just I guess you're splitting circuit to get the 240 volts.
yeah, typically every home has 240 volts coming in.
Right,
Yeah.
on both sides of the
Yeah.
panel. Okay, so, but if you were to go to that DC fast charger, 480, then you got 240 and that's doubling.
So yeah, so this doesn't require that. This only requires the receptacle. So it's going to be exactly the same as your range outlet. So we're not saying you have to put in charging equipment. We're saying you have to put in the outlet. And then the homeowner can either choose to charge with a cable from the outlet to the car, or they can put in a charging station to give them additional features and functions.
I see, okay,
So it's a pretty modest bill as amended, I would say.
I see, all right.
okay,
Thanks,
okay,
Chair.
guys, let's hold this. We'll take this up at our next voting session. Okay, while we're here, just go back to the House list. And these are all cross-filed bills that had a few amendments. Let's just see if we can knock out a few and then we'll break. But it would be nice, since we're again sitting here, starting with House Bill 78. Let's just see if we can just knock out some of these bills. So Stacy on House Bill 78. Don't
Sure.
get Prolakovich Carr's bill.
House Bill 78, Public Schools Anaphylactic Food Allergies Guidelines. This is a cross-file to Senate Bill 120. If you recall, the bill requires each local board of education before the start of the 2024-25 school year to adopt and implement guidelines in accordance with the Maryland State School Health Service guidelines to reduce the risk of exposure to anaphylactic causative agents, specifically major food allergens in classrooms and common areas.
They each have to develop a system to disclose within a reasonable time in advance of service the food served in the school and the major food allergens contained in the food. The principal of the school that has a child attending with an anaphylactic allergy must monitor and implement the strategies developed in accordance with the Maryland State School Health Service guidelines and the guidelines established by the local Board of Education as required by the bill. By August 1st, 2023, MSDE and MDH must jointly update these guidelines to reduce risk of exposure to anaphylactic causative agents in classrooms and common areas, and encourages county boards to make a good faith effort to adopt and implement the school health guidelines before the start of the 2023-2024 school year. If you look on page 3 of your packet, you'll see the Senate amendments. This bill does not incorporate those. What these amendments do is it focuses the changes to the law with regard to food-related allergens. It provides that before January 1, 2026, a public school can't be required to dispose of food products made or purchased before the federal sesame labeling requirements become effective on January 1, 2023, and require a public school that uses a food made or purchased before January 1, 2023 to disclose that the food may contain sesame. I can report to you that the House said that they like these amendments and would plan to adopt them on the Senate version, or they'll just maintain the Senate version and not strike them on that side. So the question before you is whether to add the Senate amendments to the House bill.
Okay, we've got a motion to add this Senate amendments to the bill. Second, okay, all in favor of that, raise your hand. All opposed? That carries unanimously, that amendment, House Bill 78 with those amendments. Is there a motion? Okay, second from Senator Augustine for initial from Senator Brooks. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go down to Speaker Jones's bill, House Bill 124.
House Bill 124 mandated reports revisions. This bill is the cross-file to Senate Bill 131. The only difference that is before us is that this House bill modifies several reporting requirements specific to the Department of the Environment. It impacts and delays requirements from the Commission on Climate Change, from the Bay Restoration Fund Advisory Committee, from the Office of Recycling, and it also modifies reports that pertain to waste management and waste diversion. These amendments, I've been told, will be rolled over into the Senate version, but they were not incorporated before we passed. So there are no amendments before us on this particular bill. That's right.
So then we want to, I'd like
Well,
to move
the House-
that we conform to the Senate bill.
That may not,
The House bill.
What?
I may want to provide a point of clarity. The House will be okay with the Senate version as they amend it to conform to this.
Right, that's what I said.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if I was clear on that one. Right, so that would be my recommendation to pass as is, so both will be conformed. That's right, taking the House version, moving favorably.
Wait.
But the House took our amendment.
So, and if I said that, I misspoke. The House is going to amend the Senate version to the House bill. Okay, so that's the point of clarity. As
Okay, so we have a clean bill. Yes, Senator
right.
Hester.
I just noticed that that most of the amendments you were talking about delayed certain reports
Mhm.
within MDE
Mhm.
related to waste management recycling. I'm wondering if that relates at all to some of the legislation we've just passed here? Like, was there an explanation for why they're delaying these reports?
So this was a request from MDE. I would have to take another look at the bills that we went through earlier. But these were requests from the department. Some of them were clarifying. There were some portions of the bill that instead of saying, every year, it's specified by December 31st of each year. So some were more substantive than others. Some were clarifying, some were more substantive, but I'd be happy to chat with April to make sure there isn't any duplication, but I'm not sure of what's included in those.
Okay, here, okay, let's find the answer to that out. Let's roll this into tomorrow, okay? I mean, again, let's just keep going. House Bill 402, we dealt with 178. 402, Delegate Jacobs. Stacy?
House Bill 402, Kent County Board of Education student member. This is a cross file to ironically Senate Bill 402. So this bill codifies a non-voting student member of the Kent County Board of Education into statute and specifies the selection method and responsibilities of the student member. The bill makes other conforming changes to distinguish between provisions relating to regular voting members and the non-voting student member. The student member serves a one-year term, and the initial term of the student member must begin on July 1, 2024. On page 9 of your packet, you'll see the Senate amendments to House Bill 402. What these amendments had done was clarify that the student member must be a member of student government and not a student government association representative. It strikes the provision requiring the student member to attend the May and June meetings of the Board of Education before their term begins, and prohibits a student member from attending an executive session of the board. I can tell you the House has looked at these and they plan to pass the Senate version clean. So the question before you is to put the Senate amendments onto the House version of the bill.
Okay, we got a motion to do just that. Second from Senator Washington. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendments carry unanimously. We've got House Bill 402 as amended before us. Is there a motion? Okay, motion, Senator Kagan, second from somebody. Raise your hand. You need a second, Senator Carozza. All in favor, House Bill 402 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go down to House Bill 573.
House Bill 573. Oh wait, is that me? Yes, okay, sorry. House Bill 573, the Maryland Higher Education Commission Access to Mental Health Advisory Committee Establishment. This is a cross file to Senate Bill 263. This bill establishes the Access to Mental Health Advisory Committee. These institutions participating as members of the commission must provide staff for the committee on a rotating basis. By December 1, 2023, the committee must report its findings and recommendations to the governor and specified committees of the General Assembly. The House version differs slightly from the Senate version because the House added 3 student members to the commission as specified in the bill. The question before you is, does the committee prefer to keep that amendment to have the student members or have the Senate version that does not have the student members?
Okay, Senator Lewis Young. Yeah, say it one more time for us.
So the House version differs. It added 3 student members to this commission. The Senate bill does not have those 3 members. The vote would be favorable on this bill if you prefer to include the student members, or you would add an amendment that would strike that provision if you didn't prefer that.
Okay, what's Senator Lewis Young? What's the will of the committee here?
The student members.
Okay, is there any dissenting point of view on that? Senator Augustine.
I just feel like a need to look at who else are the members, like what impact would 3 additional members have on what's going on with this?
Okay.
I just haven't looked.
Yeah, that's fine.
President of St. Mary's, President of Morgan State.
So this is an advisory committee. They're supposed to look at various aspects of the provision of mental health services and institutions. So they're sharing best practices, looking at what other institutions do. Can we share this information with others? It's not really a policy body, it's an advisory body. So I'm not sure that the students that would add it are some that have received mental health services at various institutions, and they're probably looking to see what their opinion is and whether they're receiving good services or whether they have ideas. So I'm not sure it changes the balance all that much, but pardon me. I don't know for sure. Let me see. It says
14. It looks like 14.
14.
Hey, do folks want to, again, bump this to tomorrow, or you want to think about it some more, or you want to
13,
roll with it?
14.
What's the,
So there's 15 members without the student members. So you would add 3 student members to 15. It would bring it to 18. Yeah, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Senator Kagan.
Page 3, lines 5 through 7. Can you just describe what might be on line 7, a nonprofit institution of higher education in the state? Who would that include? So it's St. Mary's, Morgan State, a community college, or a nonprofit institution of higher education in the state.
I believe this is an independent university, like a MICUA type institution.
Okay. But MICU already has a seat.
Right, but this is the student representative.
Okay.
So the student would be from one of those MICUA institutions.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, who needs another data for this to percolate?
Yeah.
Okay, let's bump this to next voting session. Let's move to House Bill 671, Garrett County Bill.
House Bill 671, Garrett County Board of County Commissioners meetings. This bill is a cross file to Senate Bill 524, which, if we recall, modified the length or the frequency of the county commissioners of Garrett County's meetings, and also authorized the meetings to be held through live video stream. So the question before us, but on this House bill, is the question of that term through a live stream versus through live video streaming. So it's passed out of our committee, currently in the possession of the House. The term that authorizes non-in-person meetings is through live video stream. That's what we passed. The bill before us, and this is on page 10, well, I'll explain that later. The House bill that we have now just says through a live stream. So when talking to the delegation, their recommendation, and this has been communicated to House Counsel, who is currently reviewing our Senate bill, of course, is that they would prefer through live audio or video streaming. So the question essentially is how to handle the non-in-person. So we can amend it to how it was passed from the Senate to live video streaming. We can keep the House bill as it is, which is through a live stream, or we can sort of come to a consensus, which is through live audio or video streaming. And the latter, again, is what the House is considering.
Senator Kagan.
Mr. Chair, colleagues, every year for the last, I don't know, 5 years or something, Delegate Corman and I have worked together on this stuff. Posting agenda and meeting materials, live streaming minutes, meetings, and then posting meeting minutes within 48, within 2 business days after they've been approved formally, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you when we started down this journey, it was with the State Board of Elections, and they started with audio, and it was impossible. I strongly recommend that we not go down that road, and I will tell you why. The little device that's the audio, speaker phone is over there, and I'm at this end of the room, and you can't tell who's speaking. You don't know their voices, and some people garble and mumble, and it's really tough. So I strongly oppose audio as an option. And especially since video is cheap or free, and we've all been using it for the last several years. I don't know why we would have to go out there.
Okay, any other comments, discussion? Okay, so where does that leave us?
So it leaves us with a couple options. So it leaves us with either keeping through a live stream, which is as the House bill has it. It could possibly end up in conference depending, but I have to talk to counsel on that. So we can leave it as is, move favorably on it with through a live stream. Or we can conform it to the Senate bill as passed, which is through live video streaming, which is,
Okay,
a little different.
yes, Sarah Augustine. Yeah,
Is this local bill? And have we talked to do we have like the delegation? What did they say? What did Senator
So
McKay say?
delegation prefers through live audio or video.
Oh, that's Senator
streaming.
McKay's position?
Right.
Interesting.
Senator Augustine, the Senate version passed the body unanimously, and that was a McKay bill.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to understand where his posture is right now. And so you're saying his posture right now is this other,
It's through live audio or video streaming, yes. And that's through the Garrett County delegation in general. I'll put that caveat on it. That was in talks with the Garrett County delegation.
11-0 at a committee, 47-0 was the Senate bill. It was unanimous. And
But
the House
bill
version is
was, too.
unanimous too.
Okay, Senator Gallion, because we got a
So-
local courtesy situation
Right,
here.
but a lot of times low courtesy, we say, well, if it's setting precedent or something we look at. So my question is, with other counties, does any place else have just audio option on this sort of thing? Or, I mean, to me, it seems, now I haven't talked to the sponsor about this particular thing, but it's hard, if you're trying to watch or listen to a meeting and you're not familiar with the voices, it'd be really hard to match stuff up, but I'm all for local courtesy, but I just wonder if that's been addressed as far as has any other counties doing the just audio option if they want.
And I'd have to scan some of those county codes, Senator. I'm not sure, just off of the top of my head, how it's written in
Okay.
some of those other
Okay,
codes.
guys, what's that? Yeah. Okay, well, Senator Kagan, why don't you have a conversation with Senator McKay and
I'm texting him as we
okay,
speak.
let's bump this to tomorrow. I think we've exhausted our Garrett County local bill bandwidth here. HB 770, is this going to take much time or we're not? Okay, let's do, because we only have like three. Don't forget, we're going to hold the Rosenberg bill, which is 817. The Terraza bill 830 was the crossfile of, on the EV thing. So we don't have to deal with, we only have kind of like three bills here left. And so let's kind of just jam through here. HB 770.
House Bill 770, Blueprint for Maryland's Future, publicly funded pre-kindergarten, Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports and Career Ladder Alterations. Ostensibly, this is a cross-file to Senate Bill 913, but it has rolled in the cross files to Senate Bill 266 and the cross file to Senate Bill 791. So it kind of put it all together in one big bill. So what this does is this emergency bill alters the definition of Tier 1 child with the publicly funded full-day pre-kindergarten aid program to include additional categories of children in fiscal 23 and 24. And correspondingly, these children are included in the pre-kindergarten enrollment count for purposes of determining the program amount to be funded by the state and local governments in fiscal 23 and 24. The bill alters requirements for the Career Ladder for Educators program and adds a school counselor to the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. So you will see there is an amendment on page 11 of your packet. And this amendment essentially just conforms the bill to all of the Senate bills to all the bills that were passed by the Senate. So for example, for Senate Bill 266, there's no changes because they're passed in identical form. This is the adding the membership to the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. For Senate Bill 791, this clarified the instructional duties of an assistant principal on the career ladder and provides for the construction of that provision of law and strikes the specific date by which county boards must select teachers on the career ladder to write curriculum, assessment items, and model lessons to when the career ladder is well established throughout the state. The House bill was quite different than what the Senate bill was. And then for Senate Bill 913, the amendments reflect the Senate versions related to publicly funded pre-K enrollment and funding adjustments for 24 and 25. And it adds provisions exempting local schools that have 100% of school participation in the community eligibility provision from having to collect alternative state income eligibility forms. That provision was added in the Senate bill, but is not in the House bill. So overall, the amendments basically just conform it to all the Senate versions of those bills.
Any discussion? Yes, Senator Watson.
So I got a call, I thought it was today, and I'm looking at the schedule. And I was expected to present SB 266 tomorrow in Ways and Means. And so now they've literally incorporated the exact verbiage into HB 770. Do I still need to go and testify on that?
Answer is yes.
I do.
Yes.
Because this is the House version where they've passed it. The Senate version is standalone. So you would have to go there if you want your bill to pass under your name as a Senate bill. Even though it's the same, like, it's like a cross file, but just on steroids.
So you should go. It's a
Okay.
message. Okay, any further discussion on these amendments? Okay, we got a motion favorable. Is there a second? Second from Senator Augustine. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries unanimously. Got 770 as amended before us. Discussion? Got a motion for Senator Augustine, Senator Washington in second. All in favor? Raise your hand. All opposed? Bill carries unanimously. As I mentioned, 817, we're going to hold 830. Yeah. Oh, yes. And
We go back to-
we have an answer from Senator McKay. So let's
Going-
go back to Garrett County local.
House Bill 671, I texted Senator McKay, who was wonderfully responsive. And he said, keep Senate version, please. And I said, I can share that. Yes, he said, please. Thanks for your help.
Okay, we're back on 671. Do you have a motion, Senator Kagan, on what you want to do on 671 with it?
Yeah, so we want to conform it to the Senate, the House.
Okay, we've got a motion, a second to conform to the Senate. Heard the direction of the delegation in the body of Senator McKay. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, HB 671 as amended. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Senator Kagan, Senator Augustine second. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Okay, let's go back down the bottom. 817 hold. 830 was the crossfile of the EV bill we're holding. 843 is the crossfile of the other
Right.
McCray bill. Wait, yeah, it's the McCray we're holding. So that leaves us with Delegate Stewart's bill 874, and then on the back, there's one. Yeah.
No, this is
Oh, I'm
not the
sorry.
crossfile.
Oh,
of
it's
the-
not? Okay, I apologize. Let's go back to Delegate Smith, 843.
Right.
Yeah, they kind of look the same, sorry. 843.
This is Senate Bill 843, Baltimore Regional Water Governance Task Force. This is the crossfile of Senate Bill 880, which this committee has already considered and passed. So this bill is an emergency bill, establishes the Baltimore Regional Water Governance Task Force to review specified findings, assess alternative governance structures for the Baltimore region's water and wastewater utility, analyze the fiscal implications and efficiencies of each alternative governance structure, and make recommendations regarding the governance model best suited for water and wastewater systems in the Baltimore region. So this is almost identical to the crossfile. There is an amendment in your packet from Senator Washington, very similar to the amendment that was added onto the Senate bill, but not quite identical. It adds intent language stating the intent of the General Assembly that the system be maintained as a public asset. The Senate version had also said that it would be operated by local government. There was a concern that that might foreclose some regional governance structure or something like that. So this cuts that out and just says maintained as a public asset.
Okay, Senator Washington, anything you want to add? Okay, you want to move your amendment? Okay, second from Senator Kagan. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the Washington amendment? Raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries unanimously. We've got House Bill 843 as amended before us. Discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, 843 carries unanimously. Let's go down to 874.
Senate Bill or House Bill
I'm
874.
sorry, House Bill 874. Did I say Senate Bill? House Bill 874.
Office of the Attorney General, Environment and Natural Resources Crimes Unit Establishment. This is the crossfile of Senate Bill 611. Currently is identical to the bill as passed by the Senate. Establishes the Environment and Natural Resources Crimes Unit in the Office of the Attorney General to investigate and prosecute violations of state criminal, environmental, and natural resources laws. There is an amendment in your voting packet on amendments on page 26. The reprint starts on page 27, being offered by Delegate Stewart. mostly technical. This is responding to the Office of the Attorney General. Had some concerns around just some of the terminology that was being used, and also strikes language requiring the unit to submit its annual report to the Attorney General, since it is part of the Attorney General's office. So that report would just be going to the General Assembly, and the governor, I believe.
Okay, those sound largely technical in nature. Is there a motion to move those amendments? Senator Lewis Young, second. Second,
It's a 566,000 expenditure, but I guess the fact that we've already passed it.
right. It's already been signed off by B&T. I didn't hear a second on the technical amendments from Delegate Stewart.
So
Senator Brooks, okay. All in favor of the technical amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry unanimously. We've got 874 as amended in front of us. Is there a motion? Senator Lewis Young, favorable. Senator Brooks, second. All in favor, raise your hand. 874. Okay, well, raise your hand. Is anybody opposed?
yes, it was a partisan.
Okay, here, let's do a roll call on this. I'm sorry. 874, let's do a roll call to avoid any confusion.
Senator Kagan,
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Yes. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion. No. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. No. Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young. Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
No.
Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonair.
No.
Senator Simonair, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries 8-3.
Yes.
I mean, 7-4. Wait, who was the 4? Oh, yeah, well, okay, apologize. 7-4. Correction. Okay, which brings us to our final bill on the voting list on the back. There's one bill, Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day, cross file of Senator Kramer's bill. Alexis?
That's right. House Bill 1244, Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's cross-filed to Senate Bill 842. This House bill, the bill establishes January 27th each year as Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day. The House bill removes language in the preamble, which can be found on the last page of our reprint, right on the back on page 32. So on lines 6 through 8, that language was contemplated, and it's my understanding that it was heavily debated in the House and was eventually removed. Of course, our Senate bill version retained the language through lines 6 through 8. So essentially, it's describing the other victims of the Holocaust and includes millions of others, including Roma individuals, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, Jehovah's Witnesses, political dissidents, etc.
Okay, before doing anything to the Kramer bill, let me consult with the sponsor of the cross file, and then we'll take this up next voting session, okay? Okay, so that finishes our work for today. And any questions, comments, thoughts before we adjourn? Okay, guys, that was a long day. We got a lot of work. Yeah.
Stay for a second.